We all had to wear these around our necks from Vienna, and I was standing there trying to be very brave.
These images are from the documentary film Lives Well Lived. My guest today is the film's director and project creator, Sky Bergman. What is your definition of a life well lived? It's a simple question with an unlimited amount of answers. So many of us listening right now started our own businesses so we could live that well-lived life, the one on our own terms. So how would you answer the life well-lived question if asked? My guest today is Sky Bergman, an artist and documentary filmmaker here discussing her film, Lives Well Lived, and her vision to connect generations. The film features interviews with people aged 75 to 100, sharing their wisdom and experiences. Through their intimate memories and inspiring personal histories, 40 people share their secrets and insights to living a meaningful life. These men and women open the vault on their journey into old age through family histories, personal triumph and tragedies, loves and losses, seeing the best and the worst of humanity along the way. Beginning with its premiere at the Santa Barbara International Film Festival, Lives Well Lived has screened in more than 200 cities. The film has won 8 awards, and the theatrical run garnered enthusiastic reviews, including a 100% fresh rating on Rotten Tomatoes. Organizations like Aging 2.0, AARP's Movies for Grown-Ups, Encore.org, and Leading Age have screened Lives Well Lived, and now the film is available for viewing on PBS. It's a powerful film and one that prompts us to look and think about the universal in the personal. Sky Bergman is here today sharing the 3 common themes that we need to have for a feeling of a life well lived. She also highlights the need to break down ageism stereotypes and foster intergenerational connections for a better society. What she has created to do this is a lesson in creative thinking for all of us. Post-film festival and theater circuit, the film has expanded into airing on PBS, as well as various projects, including an intergenerational program and a book. In making this film, Sky interplays vintage footage as well as photos from her subjects, and we talk about this additive to the film and how she's obtained these archival pieces. And this leads to how she funded the documentary. Sky feels strongly that all artists must be paid for their work, and she shares the unique way that she raised funds for the project and built a community of raving fans at the same time. Another super interesting piece that we discuss is the concept of paying it forward. As an artist, Sky has never done this type of video production. She learned everything along the way. And in the spirit of all of us asking members of our own community these questions, she's created a page on our website where you can access the starter questions that she's curated. And she's also created a video with interview tips, understanding lighting and audio, and adding in the concept of B-roll. It's the note-taking of what we learn along the way that we figure out a way to bundle it up and share. And this is something I really encourage everyone that I work with to do. And it's so great to hear Sky really capture the essence of this. So this is a super cool episode about following your passion and how ideas and the means to do them show up as you go. It's about what we can create when we listen to that voice that says, you should do this, and not listen to the voice that says, you don't know the first thing about this. It's about documenting and storytelling, but also about how your work can have a social impact. The long game is Lives Well Lived with Sky Bergman. In a world where everyone is doing, it's easy to get lost in a sea of comparison, secret tricks, and promises of overnight success. The long game? That's my approach to business. You gotta show up, you gotta do the work, and there are no quick fixes for long-term success. It takes creativity, it takes strategy, and it takes listening to the voice inside you. I'm a web designer, digital strategist, and energetic thinker, bringing you real-world business building experiences, conversations with creators who are out there doing it now, and ideas to spark the energy in your own business. And along the way, we're going to have a little bit of fun as well. So thanks for being here, and let's get to today's episode. Welcome to another episode of the Long Game Podcast. I am so excited for today's conversation. What is your definition of a life well lived? It's something as business owners that, we talk about often because so much marketing is directed towards us that is about becoming happy, finding the real you, or living your best life. And many of us have actually gotten into our businesses because we wanted a life well lived. But what would you say if someone really asked you to think about your life and what it means to live well? So many times we go back to basics, health and family and friends, but there is more to our personal journeys, and it includes so many fulfilling things. And we are discovering that today on The Long Game with my guest, Sky Bergman, an artist and documentary filmmaker who has created the film, book, PBS show, and intergenerational project, Lives Well Lived. It's about the wit and wisdom from our elders and Sky's vision to turn her creation into a number of creations in various forms. Welcome, Sky. I'm so excited to have you here today.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
So, this started out as a film. I mean, this is a documentary film that premiered at the Santa Barbara Film Festival. It's been screened in over 200 cities. It's won awards, all of these things. So tell us how you came up with this idea of interviewing people who are in their, older years, 75 years to 100 years old for this information.
Yeah, and I should say, again, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And I always tell my students the more personal, the more universal. I teach at a university. I teach photography and video. And for me, the project really started with my grandmother. And I was looking at approaching 50 and looking for positive role models of aging and just not finding them out there in the media. And I'm 58 now, so full disclosure, that was probably about 10 or 11 years ago. And here in my own family, I had my grandmother who was approaching 100 and still kicking ass, to be honest. She was going to the gym. She didn't start working out at the gym until she was 80. So it's never too late to start something new. And, I just realized that everything that I was seeing in the media were all the things that you could do to avoid aging or all the negative aspects of aging. And let's face it, the one thing we all have in common is that we age each and every day. So rather than dreading it, we should be looking forward to it. And I didn't know I was going to make a film when I started this project, but when my grandmother was turning 100, I went to visit her, and she was, like I said, working out at the gym, and I thankfully brought my camera with me, and I filmed her, and I asked her for some words of wisdom, and she said things like, live life to limits, and be kind. And, I thought, oh my goodness, there is something here, and I need to find other people out there like my grandmother. I know they exist. I know we're just not seeing them in the media, but I know they exist. And so I put together a little 1-minute clip of my grandmother at the gym, and I sent out an email blast to all my friends, family, and all the kids, students that I had taught over the years at Cal Poly. And I said, here's this little 1-minute clip of my grandmother working out at the gym. And if you have somebody in your life that's as much an inspiration as she is to me, please nominate them for this project. And I didn't know I was going to do a film. I just thought I would do this little web series thing. And I was inundated by heartwarming nominations. And that was really the beginning of a quest where I spent 4 years interviewing 40 people with a collective life experience of 3,000 years and forever changed my life. That was how it happened.
I heard you say in an interview that the last 100 years is the first time that we have looked to anyone other than our elders for advice, right? Now we look to cell phones and we have less connection. So is that, something that arose out of this project?
Well, I think that, we are so age segregated at this point. I was lucky that I grew up in a household with 4 generations. My great-grandmother was actually alive, and we live with my grandparents. She lived with them as well. And so I grew up in this intergenerational household, but I was an anomaly, I think, in my age group. I think that most of my friends were very separated from their grandparents or from any older adult in their life. And I had so much wisdom from being around not only my grandparents but their friends, and you kind of absorb it a little bit by osmosis, I think. And I really do feel like the world is suffering because we don't have that connection and because we are so age segregated. And so that is one of my missions for any other project, film. What I'm doing with Lives Well Lived right now is finding ways that we can connect generations, because I feel like the world will be a better place if we are less isolated, less segregated than we are at this moment.
Well, that's a great segue, and we'll hop to that in 1 second because you have created an intergenerational project. But I do want to focus a little bit on these stories. I mean, this was inspired by your own family story, but
Yeah.
they are stories of other families, of love, of children, of war occupation, of racism. Like, as you go through these stories, it's just so interesting. I think there are these themes, these universal themes that are woven throughout. I've noticed strength and resilience. But I also noticed luck. Luck was a theme that came through, in a number of different stories that were told. And I did pull a quote from the movie that really stuck with me, from one of the gentlemen. He said, "Luck has the aroma of perspiration. You don't get lucky without working hard." And that theme of luck, from people who were separated on trains in World War II. They were lucky from how their life led them once they were taken in by strangers, right? Like, there are all these stories, and it's really, there have been these different projects that are capture these stories, and I just think that this is uh, done in a way where you can see the personal and the universal as well.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. And I think that, you mentioned like the threads that are throughout. I think certainly I found three really common themes throughout all the people that I interviewed, because everyone wants to know, well, how can I live a life well lived? And of course, just full disclosure, I'm not a social scientist, I'm an artist. And so really I was approaching this from a very personal standpoint. Although I did, since I work at a university, I did meet with my colleagues in the social sciences department and said, hey, I'm going to do this project where I want to interview people 75 and older. Here's a list of questions I'm thinking of asking. What are some that I'm not thinking of that should be on this list? And so I worked for about 4 or 5 months really formulating the questions that I was going to ask everyone as a starting point. But again, I'm not a social scientist, so I was looking for people who could be positive role models. I didn't interview everybody from that 75 and older. I was looking at people who were an inspiration to someone else. So I think that's a certain segment of the population. And of course, we want to know,
True,
like,
very true.
right. And we want to know, like, why are these people so successful, right? What is the common element in those people? And the three common threads that I found is, one was having a sense of purpose was vitally important. I think that for many of us, we define our sense of purpose as the job that we do. So, if somebody asks you, what do? You immediately go to your job. And I think that when many people retire, they have a really hard time defining what their sense of purpose is. And that, for many people, can be a very difficult time. And so I think figuring out what your sense of purpose is, what you're going to do in your third act. But even I see it even in my college students and my university students, where maybe they're in a major and they go, oh, no, this is not what I want to do. And they're not grounded because they don't know what their sense of purpose is. So I think that for all the people in the film, it was figuring out what their sense of purpose was, but also knowing that that can change over time. And at any point in time, we can pivot and it could be a different sense of purpose that drives us. I think the other thing was, and the studies have shown this to be true, is that they all had a sense of community, and it didn't have to be family, but they all felt connected in some way. And I think that studies have shown that people live many more years if they actually have a sense of community and friendship. And lastly is really this idea of resilience and positivity. I put them kind of together. All the people in the movie had that. So one of the things that was really important to me, as you alluded to, is that I really showed in each of the people that I featured a moment in time that was really just an incredible moment that they had to get through. And then how did they get through that? How did their resilience And positivity helps see them through, so that now they look back on it years later and they're able to put a positive spin on it. But even at that moment, I think in time, having that resilience. And I really, one of the people that I interviewed in the film, Evie Justison, talked about reading Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning, which if you haven't read it, it's an amazing book. He was a Holocaust survivor, and he talked about his time in concentration camp and not being able to tell who was going to make it out based on their physical strength. It was really their emotional well-being that was able to see them through. And Evie talked about that being such an instrumental book in her life, and her takeaway from it, which I have adapted in my life, is that there are so many times in our lives where we cannot control the things that are happening around us. But what we can control is the attitude about how we deal with those things. And I think that really, in many ways, is the definition of resilience, is being able to take a really tough situation and change our attitude so that we can deal with it in a way that helps us get through that moment in time.
Yeah, and there was, this is a generation that has so many unique experiences and thoughts. Mortality was one of the questions. Like,
Yes.
how do you think about your mortality? Because you're obviously much closer to it in a way. And I thought that was handled really well, because it isn't a doom and gloom, and people really are positive and optimistic about things. I also was really struck by so much of the conversations. People had been married, a spouse had passed away. Did they stay single and live out their life, and what gave them meaning in another way? One woman had talked about how she met someone and in their 80s together. And I love this quote that she said, that she really decided that the two of them would leave that history behind. The past, they had so much to talk about that they were engrossed in what they loved now. And so this is the now, this is new. They didn't have to rehash 80 years to each other, right? To bond. And I just think those are really special moments that come out, because you're always learning. You can always be impressed by something, passionate about art, or going out to a meal together. It's not just retelling the stories of the past.
Absolutely. I think she also said, that was C.L. Bergman, who is no relation to me, but
Right.
she said that you can't change another person, not one iota. And I have to say that has so resonated with me, because many times we get into a relationship or even a friendship and we think that we're going to be able to change the other person. And once we leave that thought behind and we just appreciate the person for who they are, that relationship, whether it's a friendship or a romantic relationship, is much better, much stronger, I think. And, when you're younger, maybe you don't realize that. But I think hearing her say that, anytime I watch the film and I hear her say that, it just goes to my core. It's great.
Yeah, she was really impressionable. She made a
Yeah.
big impression on me. Okay, I want to ask you one thing about the film that I really enjoyed was this interplay of vintage photos and video as well. So you had this history and these historic images, some of which were your subjects. So talk a little bit about sourcing that. Did you go to archives or some, it's so interesting that there's this interplay of the past and the present and the voiceover all coming together in the piece.
Yeah, well, I'd like to say that that filmmaking and Lives Will Live is the first film that I've ever made. So if I can do
Wow.
it, anyone can do it. I have always felt like, instead of saying why, I say why not. And if I am driven, I follow those threads and I follow my passion. And I just had to do this film. And one of the things that I realized early on is that it is pretty boring just to look at a talking head, and it's much more interesting and engaging when you actually see some footage that describes what's happening. And I think that it was really important for me, from a historical a reference point, to it's one thing to read something in a book, another thing to hear something firsthand and also see images firsthand. And so wherever I could, if I had footage that that person had or that that person was in, that was certainly going to be something that I used. There's one bit of footage that is Marianne Wolf, who she came over on the very first Kinder transport from Vienna, Austria to the United Kingdom. And for those people that haven't seen the film or don't know what that is, the Kinder transport was something that the Quakers in the UK put together to rescue 10,000 Jewish children from Germany and Austria. And she was on the very first one. So there were news stations that were there capturing it as they landed. And we knew she had seen some other little clip of her getting off of the boat. She knew it existed, but we didn't know where it was. And so we just had to go through and find out what news organizations were there, find out who then housed that archive of news footage, because, you know, this is many decades ago.
That is truly amazing, because it is a video of her
Yeah.
as a 12-year-old, 13-year-old girl.
Eight.
Like,
She was eight. 8 years
okay,
old.
she was
Yeah.
a young girl, and you're like, I
Mhm.
mean, black and white, the whole 9 yards coming
Yep.
off. I
Yeah.
mean, that was really, it gives me chills just talking about it right
Yeah.
there.
And, you
You
know,
were
it
able to
was,
source that.
it was, I think that we just took our time. I mean, that's why it took 4 years of filming and another year of editing to really come up with it. I will say and give credit to my friend, Catherine Trujillo, who helped me find a lot of the archival footage.
Wow.
She was amazing. But, you know, a lot of it, like there's another story of Susie Edelbauman, who was incarcerated during World War II in our own country. It was very important for me to have the story of somebody who was Japanese American, because it's very easy to say all those things happened in Europe, and it's a lot more difficult for us to look inward at what happened in our own country. And so with Susie, I really, you know, I wanted to have that footage, and actually that footage I found in the National Archives. So some of the, you know, because there was a film that was put together as a propaganda film about why we were incarcerating a group of our own people. And that film is just chilling if you ever see it. So that film I got to use for free because it's in public domain.
Right.
But for example, the footage of Marianne Wolf was the Hearst Corporation. Now UCLA Film Archives has it. That was $80 a second with a 30-second minimum. So you start, you know, or $90 a second. I'm sorry. You start multiplying it out, and you see where the cost comes in making a documentary film. But it's really super important to have, I think, those moments. I mean, like you said, you connect, and my God, when we found that footage and you see, you know, Marianne at 80 something years old holding the cardboard number that she saved it all those years. And then you see the footage of her getting off of the boat with that cardboard number around her neck. It has a different, it just resonates in a very different way.
Definitely. And what a gift to her to be able to find that. She knew in her memory she had seen it or knew it existed, but also to full circle her
Absolutely.
experience.
Yeah.
That's really amazing too.
In fact, I mean, I have footage of her because the UCLA Film Archive is really kind. They gave us a DVD of everything that was shot that day, and not that we could use it, you know, it has their name over it, but so she could see it. And there was other footage of her that she had never seen before. And I filmed her watching it for the first time. And it was such a moving experience to watch that footage with her for the first time. And you could actually see her kind of going back to that moment and reliving it.
Wow, that's amazing. And, you know, I had spoken to you in, you know, before we started recording about how the segment on the Japanese internment really touched me. You know, I had done some research on it. I had been to Hart Mountain in Wyoming, which was the site of one of the Japanese internment camps, and had visited there. And it's a part of our history that isn't really taught. I actually don't remember being taught that in school. I learned about it by traveling the US and literally being on a highway on a road trip, and us seeking that out and learning about that there. So it's a part of our history that, you know, it really happened here, you know, and so it is something that I think people need their eyes open to, just to know, and maybe have some more compassion along the way about world events.
Absolutely. And the next film that I'm working on is based on Susie Edo Bauman, who is in my film. Her family gets together every year and does a ceremony called Mochisuki, which is about bringing in the new year by making mochi. And if you don't know what mochi is, it's rice that's pounded until it's smooth, and then they make these mochi balls. And it's really a story of resilience. It's bringing generations together. I love that because I used to cook in the kitchen with my grandmother. So I love seeing generations coming together through food. And I'm sure everyone can think of at least one thing or related around food that brought generations together in their own family. But the story also talks about, or the film actually also goes into the time during World War II where Japanese Americans were incarcerated, and they still figured out a way to do this mochisuki in camp.
Wow.
And I think that that is such a story of resilience, which is just amazing. And, another story of resilience that's in the Mochisuki film is about a photographer, Toyo Miyatake, who, when he knew he was a very famous photographer, like up along there with Edward Weston and Ansel Adams and all these other people. And he actually photographed the LA Olympics for a Japanese magazine prior to World War II. When he knew he was going to be interned in Manzanar, he smuggled a lens and a film back into the camp and built a 4x5 camera and photographed in the camp. And the photographs are an extraordinary document of
Wow.
someone that was in the camp looking at what was happening. And he photographed the Mochisuki ceremony, which is just amazing to me. So, I think especially you as a photographer would probably appreciate that.
Yeah,
But it's
definitely.
amazing, to think I want to document this because I don't want this to happen again. And I want to show what is happening at this moment. And he was smuggling in a lens and a film back, and he could have been gotten in a lot of trouble, and that was just something he felt that he had to do.
Yeah, and it just speaks to the whole film, though, is that our traditions that we do within our family, within ourselves, like how those are so important to our legacy. I liked that one woman said, "Oh, at some point, next 2 generations from now, I'll just be a branch on a family
Yeah.
tree." Like she understood that I'm not doing anything that is going to make me live forever, right? Like Elvis we all might talk about him for other generations, and I thought that was really interesting too, because it's this from these traditions to this simple living, even about, it's reminders to live intentionally, what you're doing now in the here and now.
Absolutely. I think those are good reminders. I think one of the really important lessons that I learned from the book came from Blanche Brown, which was to live more fully in the present moment. I think that especially as I was younger, I was so engaged with my profession, with raising kids, with doing, running hither and yon. Sometimes you don't take that moment to breathe into the moment and really appreciate when it's happening. And I do think that as a result of doing this film, I take more time to really fully appreciate in the moment when something extraordinary is happening, even just day to day things like watching a sunset or going for a
Hmm.
walk and listening to the birds. And, I think that I just have learned to really appreciate the moments a little bit more than I did before.
That's awesome. And I'd like to also shift and talk about how this has started with one film, but it has ballooned into other projects. You
Yeah.
were in the festivals and screenings in 200 cities. You really got it out there as a documentary film and entered it in different, you've won awards in different film festivals, all of those amazing accolades. Then you were able to secure a PBS partnership to have it on PBS. There's a book, on the whole movie and process and the interviews. So I love that you have thought creatively and not just stopped at this one piece. And there are more pieces, the intergenerational project. So can you talk to us a little bit about your vision? You're a first-time documentarian. Like, did you think it was just going to be this movie? Did these ideas come as you worked on things? How did that come about, these tentacles for this project?
Yeah. So I think that I have been really lucky that I had some very positive female role models in my family. My mom, my grandmother, who really instilled in me the belief that I could do anything if I set my mind to it. And when I was doing this film and not really understanding how I was going to finance it, what I was going to do, I started off writing grants for the film, and I ended up that was not working because it was 10 years ago, nobody was giving any money to somebody that was doing a film about older adults, and that just wasn't happening. But I still wanted to make it happen, and as a creative person, it was really important for me to make sure that I paid everyone that worked on the project, because I think as creative people sometimes we get taken advantage of. And so I really wanted to be sure that everyone was paid. So what I did instead was I rented out rooms in my house through Airbnb. And that was how I financed my film. And I also, in doing that, all the people that stayed with me became my biggest supporters and went to all the film festivals and voted and helped me get Audience Choice Awards because they were vested in it, right? And so that was kind of a cool way of finding the funding to make the film happen. And then since it has launched, I just continue to follow all these threads of what happens. And I think that I was lucky enough that I had a professor here at the university who teaches a class on the psychology of aging, Professor Sarah Bartlett. And one of her students told her to go see the film while it was in the movie theaters. And she saw it and she was so and just amazed by it. And when she realized we taught at the same university, she reached out. And by the end of the week, we were having lunch trying to figure out how we could make something happen together. And I had always wanted to do something to connect generations because I felt like that was the next thing, that next natural progression with the film was to use it as a learning tool. The last 100 years is the first time in human history that we've looked to anyone other than our elders for advice. And so I think that, I wanted to bring generations together. Older adults and students are the two loneliest populations. So if we can bring them together and break down those stereotypes of ageism, one story and one connection at a time, what a wonderful gift that would be. And so we came up with this intergenerational project that we've been doing for the last 7 years. And during the pandemic, we pivoted to doing it online, where we show the film to older adults and to students. And then they use the questions that I formulated, that I asked all the people in the film as a starting point. Because I think the hardest thing when you're trying to get to know somebody is what questions should you ask? And if you just say, tell me about yourself, that's just way too open-ended. Mm-hmm. And so having that starting point for a bilateral conversation, because it's really important that it's not just in one direction, that it's bilateral. And then they go off on tangents, and that's wonderful. And they do a big wrap party at the end where they get to share all the wonderful things that they learned about each other. And of course, the biggest takeaway is that they have far more in common than their differences, and the only difference is their age. And I think that's such an important gift. And we've been doing this around the country. PBS Learning Media picked it up. So it's on their website for K through 12 teachers to use it and implement it in their classrooms. And now pretty much any film that I work on has to have an intergenerational connection twist to it. And so I think that's become kind of my life mission, is to really promote connecting generations. And in fact, the book that I wrote, which the first half of it really is about lives well lived, the lessons that I learned along the way, all the wonderful quotes from all the people that I interviewed. But the second half is completely dedicated to connecting generations. And I interviewed 40 people. I like the number 40. I interviewed 40 people who are doing around the globe, who are doing amazing work connecting generations, whether it's through an intergenerational symphony or co-generational housing, just really interesting ways to connect generations, because I'm hoping it will inspire other people to want to do something like that, to either become a part of one of these organizations or create their own in some small way, to connect generations and break down those stereotypes of ageism, and to, make the world a better place, really, by bringing generations together.
Yeah, and your work, I mean, it goes beyond just this. It really has a social impact. It goes beyond just get the message, watch the film, have a good feeling, go out to dinner. It really has a social impact as you go on. And I really appreciate how you've turned this into your mission, right? You've combined it with the other parts of your life. One other aspect that I find really intriguing is on your website, and everyone, we're going to have links where you can, watch the trailer and find out about the film and where to find it, all of these pieces. And there is one page on the website called Take Action, and it actually gives you can download the list of questions that were asked so that you can access them yourself to have these conversations. Like, you can have it with your parents. I mean, I'm in my 50s. The majority of my audience is there and older as well. We're all in our 40s, 50s, and beyond. So if you have parents still, these questions, you can take them to them. I also love that you have done a video. Sky has created a video on this Take Action page with interview tips, techniques, how to record the audio, all of this, so that if you're going to do this yourself, here's a little bit of a boost to help you get along. So is that just the teacher in you always, the
Yeah.
professor in you?
I think so. I can't get away from it. And I think that also because I came into this cold, really, I'd never done video before until my grandmother came out to visit me when she was 96 from Florida, and I live in California. And she was an amazing cook who never wrote a recipe down. And I learned how to do filmmaking because I wanted to not just write her recipes down, but hear her voice, see the gesture of her hands as she was cooking. And digital cameras at that point started shooting video. And so I thought, well, let me use this new technology and learn how to do this. And we have a motto here at my university that's learn by doing. And I live that motto. So I am not afraid to make mistakes. I'm not afraid to ask other people for help. But I think because I'm was so close to it when I made that video about how to interview people, because I was learning. I mean, this was all, I was a
Mhm.
total newbie about it. And I think sometimes those are the best teachers because you're like, you haven't forgotten all the steps along the way, you know? And I think the other thing is if you embark on any kind of project, I have found that has been in my best interest to always say, I don't know how to do this. You are doing an amazing job. How do I do this? How can you help me? Bring
Mhm.
a good team together. Don't necessarily do it solo. I think when you have other people that support you, makes a project a much better project. But interview your friends, your family, your loved ones. One of the biggest regrets that people had that I interviewed was not interviewing somebody, a loved one that passed away, because you can never go back and recreate that. And even if it's just that you do a crappy interview on your iPhone, doesn't matter. You'll have that for yourself. And I think that that is so important. I mean, my tips help you learn how to do lighting a little bit better, how to do sound a little bit better. But the reality is, even if you just have it for yourself, I think I was meant to do this work because being Italian, we would have Sunday dinners that would last forever. And I actually appreciated that when I was a kid and realized that there was something amazing that was happening with storytelling. And that was when, after dinner, we would sit with fruit and nuts and a little bit of wine, not for me, for my grandparents. And they would, and I would just put a tape recorder on the table and record their conversations. And I still have some of those recordings. And even though I'll never do anything with them,
Wow.
I am so grateful that I have them. So, don't put off doing some of that with somebody that you love because you just never know.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be perfect, as we
No.
know. But this, I love this guidance because people do have the questions. How do I do this? Or just understanding a little bit better of an interview way. So many of us have just we as business owners get on our business and we're learning and doing as we go. One thing I always tell my clients is like, document along the way, like what are your learnings, just like you did this piece. What did I
Right.
not know when I first started that I know now 4 years later that I can help make it easier for the people following, right?
Absolutely.
So I think that is just a beautiful gift to the next generation or the next of all your viewers, to be able to say, hey, let me help you make it easier. And it's something that we should all be doing when we're learning and really delving into something. I mean, this became your life for 4 years. I know how those kind of projects go.
Well, yeah, it's really been my life for like 11 years
Yeah, yeah.
now.
Well, 11 years now, right? Those 4 years plus the
4
promotion
years of
and
just
all of the
filming, right?
Film Fest, right?
Yeah. And I just wanted to say I have a quote I'm looking at that's above my desk that says, a candle loses nothing by lighting another candle. And, I think what you said about writing down your ideas as you're doing something and then paying it forward, that's kind of my idea of lighting another candle, right? Is that
Mhm.
I lose nothing by helping someone else. The world becomes a better place by me helping somebody else. And so I think if you can remember those moments of frustration, of trial, and what you did to get through that, it's going to help somebody else. So it's really, it's good to share those experiences and share what your knowledge is so that you can maybe help shine a light on someone else.
That I'm going to end it right there. I can't even say anything else. Really, one of the things that I took from watching the film, I just wrote down a number of different amazing quotes as well. This film is filled with just these impactful pieces that hit it different ways. So I love that you ended with that quote. And I want to encourage everyone, again, in the show notes, we'll have all the links. It's lives-well-live.com. You can see Sky's trailer and see where to find it. You can check out the book. It's on Amazon and all of the booksellers. And also we'll have a link to the Take Action page. So you can download and get these questions to be able to do something like this in your own life. And, however far you want to push it or close you want to keep it for yourself. So I want to thank you so much for being here and sharing this experience and these ideas with us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was just a pleasure to have a nice conversation with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, everyone. We will see you in another week. Thanks for joining me today. You can access more information, links mentioned in this episode, and the show notes at thelonggamepodcast.net. If today's show connected with you in some way, please share it with your friends or hop on and leave a review. Both of these make a really big difference. All right, until next time, keep playing the long game.